Hello and welcome back to EngLab Pro. I'm Mo. We're going to continue our grammar lessons with the way we use articles in English. By articles, I mean a, an, and de. Let's start. Nouns are basically divided into two groups of countable and uncountable nouns. When a noun is countable, it can be either singular or plural. Now let's see how this affects the way articles are used. As well as the previous categorization of nouns into countable and uncountable and singular and plural, you have another categorization, and that is identified and unidentified. When we say a noun is unidentified, it means that it is not known to us. Both the speaker and the listener don't know that. It's not specific, it is very general. But when it is identified, it means that both the speaker and the listener know that it is specific and we know what we are talking about. Let's see how it affects the use of articles here. Well, if a noun is singular and unidentified, we use a or an for that. For example, say a book, an apple. This could be any book. This could be any apple, one book. And we don't know what that is. It could be anything. When we add s or es to that, we make it plural. Of course, most of the nouns, there are some nouns that become pluralized with some exceptional rules. So we say books or apples. Generally, we're talking about all the books. We're talking about all the apples. They are not known to us. It's a general thing. But when we talk about the identified book or the identified apple, say the book or the apple, we need to use the for that. It means a specific book, the book on the table, the book which we talked about previously, or the apple that I ate. I define that with my sentence and we both know which apple I'm talking about. And in the plural form, we use the plus the plural form of the noun. For example, the books means a specific number of books that we already know what they are. For example, we say the books we bought yesterday. I explain in the following what I mean by the books or the apples. When a noun is uncountable and unidentified, we don't use any articles for that. Say water and bread. Generally, we're talking about water and bread. But when they are identified, for example, the water in the glass, the bread which is in the fridge, we use the for that. So this is the way we use articles. When a noun is singular, unidentified, we use a or an. When the noun is unidentified, plural, we use the plural form of the noun. And when it is unidentified and uncountable, we don't use any articles. When they are identified, I mean the nouns are identified, in all cases we use the. Now let's take a look at some examples. For example, I had a banana and an apple. I gave the banana to Jane and the apple to John. At first, I say I had a banana and an apple. The listener doesn't know which banana or apple I'm talking about. But when I refer to them again, I say I gave the banana. Which banana? The banana I had to Jane, and the apple to John. Which apple? The apple that I had. So when we are talking about something for the first time, we don't use a definite article. We use an indefinite article. In this case, a or an. But when we know that, we've already talked about it, we use the. Another example. He had a restaurant in an old small town. It's just a town. We don't know which town it is. I have two children, a boy and a girl. It's the first time I'm talking about my children, right? The boy. Now I've already mentioned the boy, so I use the boy. The boy is 2 and the girl is 9. Tigers are bigger in size than lions. I'm generally talking about all the tigers and all the lions. So plural noun, and they are unidentified. And the last example is the tiger in this zoo is the biggest one that I have ever seen. the tiger in this zoo. Which tiger? The one that is in this zoo, not just a random tiger. So I use the. In this zoo is the biggest one. Remember that all the time with superlative adjectives, adjectives that have est and the most, we use the all the time. I have ever seen. Now let's talk about some exceptions, or maybe we can say some extra rules that exist for the use of articles. Let's go first about a or an. Well, we use the indefinite article a or an with professions. For example, I'm a nurse, John is an architect, I'm an English teacher. So for jobs, for professions, we use a or an, we use the indefinite article. With some expressions of quantity, again, we use a or an. For example, we say a pair of, a little, a couple of, a few. These are some of the expressions of quantity that generally go with the indefinite article. And with some expressions of frequency, we also use, for example, say once a week, 3 times a day, means 3 times per day or once per day. So in these situations, we use the indefinite article a or an. Now some exceptions or rules about the definite article. Well, we use the definite article the before seas, rivers, hotels, pubs, theaters, museums, newspapers, and mountain ranges. Let me give you an example for each. For example, you can say the Baltic Sea. For rivers, the Mississippi. For hotels, we can say the Hilton. For pubs, for example, the Gergor Inn. Theaters, the Royal Shakespeare Theatre, for example. Museums, the British Museum. Newspapers, we can say the Times. For mountain ranges, we can say the Alps. Remember, not for a single mountain, for a mountain range, a group of mountains together. If there is only one of something in the world, we use the. For example, say the sun, the White House. And with superlative adjectives, for example, the richest man in the world or the tallest building in the city. See, the richest, the tallest. So these are the situations that the is always used. Also, some situations in which we don't use any article. We call them no article situations. Well, we use no article before towns, streets, languages, magazines, meals, airports, stations, and mountains. Let's go through examples. For towns, for example, you can say London. For streets, you can say Oxford Street. For languages, you can say English. Vogue is a magazine, so we don't say the Vogue, we say Vogue. For meals, lunch, breakfast, dinner, we don't use anything. For airports, we can, for example, see John F. Kennedy Airport, or for stations, you can say Central Station, Central Train Station in New York City, or for mountains, you can say Mount Everest. Remember, again, I repeat that for a single mountain, we say Mount Everest, Mount Kilimanjaro. We don't use the or a or an. But for a mountain range, when there are some mountains together, we use the, for example, the Alps, the Andes. Before some places and some forms of transport, we don't use any article. For example, at home, at school, at university, to university, by car, in bed, to bed, by bus, by train, at work, to work, by plane, on foot. Generally, before the name of countries, we don't use the, except some specific ones. So we say Japan, Germany, England, no the, but the UK, the US, the UAE, the Netherlands, and the Philippines. Of course, there are some more, but these are the major ones. So generally, countries do not have any article, but for the UK, the US, the UAE, the Netherlands, and the Philippines, we use the. Now let's do an exercise together to make sure you have understood the lesson well. Well, fill in the blanks with a and the or no article. There are 8 sentences with blanks. Pause the video for a minute or so and then try to answer them and then replay the video to check your answers. I'll start with the first one. We stayed in hotel in Paris. The listener doesn't know which hotel I'm talking about, so I say a hotel. We don't know which hotel it is. She's eating orange. Which orange? We don't know which orange. So we say she's eating an orange, an indefinite article. Sun rises in the east. The sun. If you remember, we mentioned that when there is only one thing of something in the world, we use the. Have you visited British Museum? The British Museum. For museums, we use the. She loves music. Generally, we're talking about music. There is no specific music that we're talking about. And then it is an uncountable noun, so no article. They climbed Mount Everest. Again, we mentioned that for mountains, we don't use an article, but when they are mountain ranges, we use they. I've always wanted to visit Netherlands. Well, we say the Netherlands. Again, I repeat, for countries, we don't use the, but for some specific countries like the Netherlands, we use the. And finally, she's going to hospital to see her uncle. She's going to the hospital to see her uncle. Why the? Because definitely they know which hospital it is. It is the hospital where his uncle is there. Well, I hope that you've learned the lesson well. Of course, there are more rules to this, but I think what I taught you here in this video is enough for having a general understanding of how we use articles in English. If you have any questions, ask your questions in the form of comments, and also you can make some sentences with the things that you learned here and write them in comments. Hope to see you again, and thank you for watching EngLab Pro again. Bye.